Hey, hey Anna, good to see you. And Molly's here as well. I haven't seen JB come in yet, but hopefully he'll be coming soon. So name in the chat. If you're not getting emails from us and would like to, then put your email alongside there. I am excited about today. I have been hearing about the work that Molly did back when she was a BSW, and it's just really cool to see things turn into community change and long-term growth. So we're going to be talking about some data that Molly collected back when she was a BSW, and then on into her MSW work, and then what that work has led to in the community. And so I think JB's checking on, but Molly and Anna, and then JB when he gets in, if y'all don't mind to introduce yourselves and then give us a little bit about what your current roles are in the community. And then there's JB. Hey, JB.
Hey.
Hey, we're just getting started with introductions. Just a sentence or two about what your role is in the community, and then we'll get started talking some more about the project that y'all are working on. Let's see, Molly, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first, but I want to make sure to say in this space that the lead and recovery on the inside in our program, that we are a counterpart of the work, but that this work has largely been headed up by JB and Anna Byrch, and I want to make sure that they get all the credit, and really proud of how this has grown and what they've taken on. So we are all here to support them, but sometimes because the work is so similar that it can get commingled or confused. But it really has been a huge effort by JB and Anna. But anyways, my name is Molly Furman. I'm the program coordinator for the Watauga Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program and the Watauga Detention Recovery on the Inside program. Those are both housed beneath the Mediation and Restorative Justice Center. I'm also a woman in long-term recovery. I'm a parent. I have 3 children, and my partner has 3 children. I've lived in Watauga County all my life, pretty much, and just passionate about this group and about the work. So thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. I'll pass to JB.
Excuse me, I just took a bite. I'm JB Byrch. I volunteer in a lot of capacities in the community, and as it relates to the high country reentry work, which we're talking about today. Anna and I have been working together for a year and some change, trying to get this thing off the ground. And so I volunteer with Anna to help coordinate the High Country Reentry Collaborative. Is that all the questions that I'm supposed to answer? Sweet. All right.
Now you can keep on eating.
You're up, Anna.
I'm Anna Dudley, also, in a volunteer capacity. I am employed, but has nothing to do with this, which is perfectly fine. And yeah, just been working with JB, really trying to get this, in motion and really, turn into something sustainable and, something that will endure. So yeah.
Thanks, Anna. I talked with Anna and JB a few weeks ago, and one of the things that they reminded me about was that a good basis for this work is some of the work that Molly had done a few years ago, and asked that we include Molly. So I feel like, Molly, that would be a good starting place, if you don't mind, to start by talking about the work and kind of the data collection that you did at the jail a few years ago and the things that you found.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen. I'm a visual person, so I have a PowerPoint here. Oh, it says it's disabled screen sharing. Is there a way we can
Do I need to make you a co-host?
Maybe.
Let me try that. Okay, you are one now. See if that helps you.
Okay. All right, so this is a topic that I could talk about for hours. So I've tried to condense it down into a brief data presentation of kind of the where and why for me did this begin. So I'll start with the why. This data collection was originally initiated by the Watauga County Sheriff's Office. I was the first social work intern at the Sheriff's Office in the detention center, and they really just said, you know, the same people are coming back over and over again. We know that there's other things going on and that them being here isn't addressing any of that. So just do something about that. And so we started to look at, one, the why. Why are people coming back over and over again? And two, what can we do as law enforcement to try and intervene in that cycle to make a difference in our community members' lives who are affected by this? And then for me personally, you know, the big why, as I shared, was that, you know, I am a person in recovery. I am a person with history of involvement with the criminal justice system. So from my own personal experience and what I had witnessed, like, I knew some of the reasons, probably the biggest reasons why people are coming back over and over again, but wanted to be able to prove it, wanted to be able to put it on paper and talk about and share with people in power and with those big decision-making abilities, like, this is what's happening, and this might be, you know, a step towards a solution, and what does that look like? So the first thing that I did to try to accomplish that was talk to people and get to know them. And I did that through a series of 50 interviews. The inclusion criteria was only that they had to be arrested 3 or more times in Watauga County. Exclusion, obviously less than 3 arrests if they were under 18, a security risk, or they had a forensic evaluation. I wanted to ask all of those traditional questions that would usually be included in a study like this, like prior arrest, juvenile record, substance use, but I also wanted to look at those non-traditional criminogenic factors like ACEs and childhood trauma and social and emotional support. This is some of the demographics of the total jail population at the time. So this study was completed in 2018. We have played around with the idea of doing it again in 2023 because that would be 5 years and see what the difference is. But demographics for the jail at that time, the average daily census was 70 males, about 13 females. From August 2017 to August 2018, the jail processed almost 2,000 arrests. So that could be the same person over and over again, but almost 2,000 arrests. And I took a very long time, but what I did was for all of those confinement periods that I added up, how long everybody in that period of time had spent in jail, and the total was almost 40,000 days of collective lost productivity in Watauga County alone, and that comes out to be over 100 years lost in a single year. Race kind of mirrors our general population of Watauga County. However, minorities are overrepresented, as it is true in most prison and jails. Age, primarily that 18 to 35. I'm going to talk really fast. If you want to stop me, Denise, you're welcome to. The study sample demographics, 40 men, 10 women, again, trying to mirror, you know, the general population of the jail and kind of the same age. Alleged offenses. So when I approached people for this study, I did not include or exclude anybody based on their alleged offense. It was really just that, have you been there 3 or more times? And I would do that by looking at, one, who was there and how many times they had been arrested before, and two, the people that had came in yesterday. That was the first thing I'd do every morning, and see who had came in and what their history was. And if they met those inclusion criteria, then I would approach them and say, you know, hey, I'm, you know, looking at some of the reasons why people might come back to jail? Are you comfortable, sharing some of your story with me to hopefully make a difference is usually how I would frame it. So these alleged offenses, it was a broad spectrum, everything from, a minor probation violation, which may have stemmed from not being able to pay fines, up to those more violent offenses. Offense types. So at the top, and I apologize, this isn't a great graph because it doesn't have the actual percentages in the bars, but we can see that in Watauga County, and this is true for most jail settings, is that a very small percentage of the people who are there are actually there serving a sentence. Most of the people who are there pre-trial. So they're awaiting the resolution of their court date. And for most of them, if they had the financial resources or family support, that they could be out of jail. We'll see at the bottom that quite a bit of them, at least most of the females, were there for some violation of community supervision, which would be probation or parole. All right, so I asked all of these questions and got to deciphering this information, and what we found was that the 4 biggest commonalities among people who cycle in and out of incarceration in Watauga County was 1, substance use, and I think the rate of opiate use has gone up more since that time, but like fashion and everything else, it takes a few more years for it to make its way up. So at the time, 65% were reporting methamphetamine use, 37% were reporting opiate use, 64% using intravenously, and almost 90% fell into that most severe risk category for having a substance use disorder. Trying to link back whether those offenses were tied to drug or alcohol use, the 42% was directly drug or alcohol related, meaning that you could look at the charge on paper and say, yes, that is drug or alcohol related, like a DUI or a possession or paraphernalia. For all those offenses that you couldn't do that, I asked the question, do you think that this series of circumstances would have happened if drugs or alcohol weren't an influence in your life? And 83% said yes. So we add that together, 90% of the random offenses studied in Watauga County were drug or alcohol related. The second biggest commonality was poor mental health, with 50% reporting that they had been diagnosed with a mental with a mental illness at some point in their lifetime. 87% had been prescribed a medication or some other treatment had been recommended to them. However, only a quarter were compliant with treatment outside of confinement, with the biggest barriers being that they couldn't afford their medication, the inaccessibility of providers, or a big one that was reported was that it wasn't the priority. And I want to make sure to say, when we just say that, at face value, that could look like you could blame it on the person that, well, their behavioral health isn't important enough to them. If they just cared more about it, if they were ready, they would pull themselves up by their bootstraps and make this, a priority in their lives, because obviously it's important. But I printed out this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where if you're wondering about where your next meal is coming from, if you're wondering about what roof, or if any, is going to be over your head tonight, that your brain is literally not capable of operating up here and trying to focus on those higher levels of thought. So I wanted to add that. Unstable housing, 60% were unhoused, sleeping outside or in a shelter, or were doubling up or couch surfing at arrest. That number grew to 77% would be unhoused or doubling up at release. And then ACEs. ACEs was the biggest one other than substance use. 96% reported they grew up in some form of household dysfunction, 65% sexual, emotional, or physical abuse, and 57% emotional or physical neglect. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, so I'm not going to go over too much of this part, but we know about that dose response relationship where the more of the ACEs that you have, the with higher certainty can we predict, lower social, emotional, physical health outcomes. So that's that 4 or more. And the average for the women was above 6, average for the men was above 5. Looking at the different categories of trauma among men and women, I'm sorry, I always struggle with the slides and Zoom with all the boxes where it's hard to see everything. Okay, I apologize. So we see higher rates of ACEs among women in abuse and household dysfunction. Actually, half of the women that I interviewed reported that they had been sexually abused or molested as children, but nearly all men and women had experienced some form of household dysfunction as a child. ACEs distribution, so this is those 10 different questions that we asked. High rates of divorce, high rates of parents or other caretakers with addiction or mental illness, or growing up feeling in fear, unloved, physical abuse, incarceration, witnesses to domestic violence, a little bit lower basic need neglect. And since this work began, there have been lots of other categories that if I was in charge of that study that I would add. But with this study, some things that continued to go up over and over again that weren't included if they had been, maybe they would have had a higher ACEs score, were the death of somebody that they were very, very close to, a witness to extreme violence in the home, not just domestic violence against a mother. That they were removed from parents as children through the foster care or adoption process, living independently at a young age. This was especially true for older people that I spoke with who may be, before the social safety nets were designed the way that we were, people moving out of the home completely at 13, 14 years old and being responsible for their own well-being, and homeless youth. So what needs to change? We asked the question, what do you think needs to change in our community to help you get ahead or to stop coming back to jail? 81% they said they had that they saw an inefficiency or had a distrust of the local criminal justice system. 3/4 wanted more opportunities for treatment and resource coordination. 40% had a distrust of local agencies outside of law enforcement, or that the resources that were available to them were insufficient in meeting their needs. 35% that community supervision was too difficult without treatment or support, and 1/4 of them said that we needed more education in the community on the disease of addiction and those with criminal history. So Denise touched a little bit on the growth, and I want to leave as much time as possible for Anna and JB, but just what we have done with the LEAD program and Recovery on the Inside and the Mediation and Restorative Justice Center since that time. So Recovery on the Inside started out of this data. With everyone that we interviewed, we did some resource coordination and basic reentry services for everyone where we were able to. And that has grown to today that we have dedicated staff for that program. I did that work as an intern, and then I did it for free as a volunteer before we were able to secure funding. And now Ashley Worth is our case manager at the jail. She is in the process of licensure now that she's graduated, but when she was in her master's program getting her degree in clinical and mental health counseling, she actually wrote her own internship practicum in a collaboration with the sheriff's office, with a private clinician and ASU and the mediation center to be able to do clinical work in the jail for the last 6 months. And that has been an incredible win for us in getting assessments and providing counseling services to the jail population. There's still a long way to go with that, but we've made a start. So in that program, we do case management, peer support, those clinical services that I spoke about. We can meet people at the door and give them rides to appointments, or maybe we've gotten them in somewhere off the mountain. We provide tons of transportation for people. We can pay for entry houses or entry fees into treatment centers and halfway houses and then take them there. But we work on a harm reduction model. So if you're not at a stage of change where you want to do those types of things, have you eaten today? Do you know where you're getting your meals tonight? Do you know where you're staying tonight? Helping people think and talk through some of those things and providing some of those tangible, just basic supports that people need to feel valued and human. And it's because it's all about building relationships. So we believe if we put in all the relational work at the beginning, regardless of behavior or circumstances, that person is a lot more likely when they do reach a stage of change to, or if they do, that they know where to go. They already know who to trust, and then we can pull out all the stops to make whatever they need happen, letting people identify their own goals. The LEAD program, we're celebrating 2 years of operation this January, this month, and that's designed to be an officer-led program where officers in their regular line of duty come into contact with people. They have an alternative instead of arresting them to make diversions to work with us instead. What happens overwhelmingly more often is that an officer is not leveraging a criminal charge, but they just say, like, we recognize this person needs help. I'm not thinking about charging them. Just will you, go work with the LEAD program? And we do a lot of the same things, a lot of that resource coordinating and peer support and regular consistent outreach, Narcan distribution. We do a lot of agency and community trainings. We've recently we're starting to gear up for some groups, so we're very excited about that. The LEAD program was created out of a coalition group and to try to launch this program in Watauga County. And then once it was launched, we kind of looked around and said, like, well, this is a pretty great group of like-minded people. It would be a shame to just for it to dissolve. Are there other things that we want to work on? So that group still meets every month to work on restorative justice issues in Watauga County. If you have any inkling of interest in this work, please come and join us. We're recently in the process of identifying new priorities and new goals, and I've listed them here. One of the biggest ones, which I'm sure JB and Anna will talk about, is this develop sober living and transitional housing in Watauga County. So that's one of the more community-minded growth things that I've seen over the last 4 years, but there's also been this new group that has come up, the High Country Reentry Collaborative, which is really innovating and exciting and hard work that I'm glad that is rippling out. So I'll let JB and Anna take over.
Thanks, Molly. So JB and Anna, when we talked a few weeks ago, I hadn't heard anything about this and was interested in, and I love to hear things from the beginning. So if y'all don't mind, just to talk about kind of how you got started and who's involved and where you're trying to go, some of those details.
I know, we, relating to, our personal and, how we got, personally motivated to, with this type of thing. Mine has multiple layers, so I'll try to be very succinct. Major one is my own personal struggle with chronic and severe mental illness. Definitely, several hospitalizations, couple well checks, definitely took a little ride with the deputy. And, the way I see it is like struggling with mental illness, I think you spend your entire lifetime in recovery and, dealing with the symptoms and the consequences of those symptoms of mental illness are their own form of trauma. And, the hardest part about it is you have really no one to blame but biology and genetics, And so, but then I learned about the prevalence of mental illness in the criminal justice system and the deinstitutionalization. And for my criminal justice degree, I did a 12-week internship at Alexander Correctional Institution in their residential mental health unit. And, looking through their files and records on Opus, I discovered that most of them had been in and out of Broughton, in and out of jail before their, this incarceration. And to me, I saw that as just a very grave injustice. And also, like, during my adolescence, I did a lot of things I shouldn't have. And the only thing that saved me from getting in a lot of trouble was being a white female, being the only white female. And so that shed light even more light on the injustice of the criminal justice system. And so where this comes to reentry is if I was not a privileged white female, with the support system and everything I had, I would be dead. I wouldn't be here. And so I could not imagine, the individuals with the lack of resources and the supports, and dealing with mental illness. I don't know, it just, with my own personal experience, it's devastating that I'm so glad Molly showed that Maslow's, hierarchy that's so relevant. Because I had all my needs met, I was able to focus and, try to get a resemblance of stability. And so, my goal with this reentry work is, it's a big injustice, social injustice for the individuals, that become entangled in our criminal justice system because they don't have those supports and resources like I did. And so is my hope, with this, collaborative is to build that support network and make it strong for those reentering.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate you sharing part of your story with us. I'm going to let JB talk a little bit about why he does the work too. Then we'll come back together and talk about some of the details of meetings and goals and that kind of thing. So JB, just interested in whatever you would like to share about why you're passionate about this work that y'all are doing.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I guess the long story short is that, for me, it's all related to my faith and discipleship, following Jesus. And I had a close friend who Anna interned with, who is passionate about this work, Pastor Luke Edwards, who is in the area. And through my experiences and relationships with kind of the folks who are directly impacted in my life in the Bradford Trailer Park for 7 or 8 years, just meeting people sort of, I think about like the same types of people that Molly was meeting over and over again in the jail. I was meeting on my street and seeing them when they were out or getting calls when they were incarcerated, and just getting to know people's full stories. For me, it started with a religious conviction. Jesus says in Matthew 25, however you treat those who are considered the least is how you treat him. And so that it started with a conviction to me to love people who are seen as the least in society as a spiritual practice. And And I fell in love with those people. It didn't mean that relationships were easy. We all love people who are very challenging to love and frustrating. That's part of the package deal. But coming to love those people made me ask the question, and a part of my own spiritual journey was just not just being in relationships with people while they were suffering under unjust structures, but asking, what does justice look like? What does love? One theologian describes that justice is love in the public square. So what does a loving system look like? And that for me was the journey of my getting involved in kind of justice work, and in 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, having the conversation, whatever happened with Anna, whatever happened with the reentry council dream, and long story short, we said, well, let's make it happen. Let's get this thing off the ground. We tried long enough the way we were going. Let's try something a little different. Let's get it started. And so we're, I guess, like 7 months into meeting regularly, monthly. But yeah, that's a little bit about me and how I got involved.
Thanks, JB. So some detail, let's see. One of the questions we always try to cover on this is, how do y'all work with people from trauma? And so I think when we were talking before, y'all said right now it's more of a changing, correct me if I'm wrong, changing of systems and structures kind of perspective, rather than necessarily providing direct services, more like what Molly and Ashley like to do. So either one of you want to kind of talk a little bit more about just where you are in the development of the collaborative and what your first few goals are?
Like you said, you're more on the kind of community system level, trying to, get our name out there and build, I guess our organizational capacity. And not necessarily at that point where we are doing that direct support, and because we're just not developed quite yet to do any type of case management sort of thing. So right now we're just really trying to build a network, build those connections, make them stronger, and building those connections to resources and supports to address the reentry specific needs. Like Molly said, so much of our work is similar, but I guess we're just trying to build more community support and network to address the reentry needs.
And a little bit more specifically, so from the beginning, we reached out to Chief Randy Townsend, the Chief PO, and we just asked him, what would you need a group like this to do to be worth being involved in, or to make a positive impact? What needs do you see? You and the other POs are doing a lot of reentry work already. What do you see? What would we need to do? And so kind of working on some of those things. one of those kind of structures that we were trying to improve was when there was a crisis emergency situation where somebody's housing changed, particularly housing changed, and somebody's housing situation can contribute to them being violated and ending up incarcerated again. So we spent some time trying to create a sort of pathway when there was one of those needs, where some temporary housing could be met. And people often think of the hospitality house, but people who have a sex related charge can't stay at the hospitality house, or if somebody's a sex offender or something like that. And there's other reasons too, sometimes for the sake of somebody's recovery, the hospitality house can be a really challenging place for somebody to stay. And so anyways, that, and also a guide to the resources specific to reentry is something that we're hoping to accomplish here, maybe this month or next month, and in partnership with Mediation and Restorative Justice Center and Wilkes Recovery Revolution, we're hoping this year at least to work towards implementing what Wilkes Recovery Revolution has called a recovery-friendly workplace. And that includes folks with a record being able to be hired. And it's also sort of a system of support for employers, and how employers can, it's like a training and support for employers as well, in how to do that. And so those are some of the kind of tangible, practical projects that we've been working on in the past year.
This hasn't happened when I was talking to you before, but I'm teaching a communities and organizations class, and all the different ways that groups and initiative and grassroots efforts form and what kind of form they take. And so I was thinking about like WCCI and the Reentry Collaborative and Recovery on the Inside and some other things that we all do, and just how they formulated and what structure they've taken. And but y'all are, I think I remember, you're not a nonprofit. You are a group that's meeting voluntarily around a common issue. Who else do you have on board with you? Like what are some of the agencies that are involved?
Some agencies that are represented, and help me here, Anna. And it's also tricky because we've had folks involved, and you know how these things are, right? I mean, we had a lot of people involved who aren't attending now, but I would say, in some way, shape, or form, we're connected to DPS, Mediation Restorative Justice Center, Hospitality House, Oasis, the Safe Harbor. Who else?
Wells, App Health.
Yep.
NC Works. I guess the chambers.
Yep, we're working with the chambers. We've got some folks representing churches who are just volunteering time and are passionate, including a prison minister. There's some social work students who hop on, lead. Who else?
That's a good sized group.
All the important folks.
And so are y'all having regular monthly, quarterly meetings?
So we have every Thursday at 10, we have like our little small volunteer group. And then the last Thursday of every month, we have our big, the monthly collaborative meeting. So we meet weekly, our little volunteer group.
Yeah. What do you have? I remember the first few days of WCCI and just the struggle to form. Do you have a mission statement, and do you have a beginning, like what you want to try to work on first thing?
The mission statement, vision statement is on our agenda. We wanted to, kind of build a little bit and develop a little more before deciding, on, making that mission statement. But that is, that's going to be very critical, and we shall have that formulated soon.
Yeah, we wanted to kind of get our strategy was sort of to start doing the work and then to figure out how to describe it. We didn't want to kind of become so word bound and that we weren't kind of doing the work. So we were figuring out what work we wanted to do, which was essentially like, we want to make, Watauga County, the high country, an easier place to re-enter. We were convinced, and the data, shows that the high country is, still have a lot of support that people re-entering need, in order to stand a chance, in order for the people who re-enter successfully to not be an extreme minority or an extreme exception. And so we wanted to make, our goal was to make the high country a easier place to come back to, start over, when people are ready to do that. And so, we started with kind of Chief Townsend's observations, and then we started with some of our own observations. And as we started building the collaborative, we were just having conversations saying, okay, well, what's a really important, game-changing small step that we can make, and then we just started working on it. So what's come up through, our collaboration with Mediation Restorative Justice Center most recently is this partnership with Wilkes Recovery Revolution. And jobs from the beginning. Jobs is a huge issue. If you have a record, who hires in Watauga County? Well, we didn't know. I mean, we knew a few, but we knew that a lot of people would probably turn you away. And so jobs, transportation, housing have been really huge priorities. And then from those, we've just tried to be specific. Okay, related to housing, what could we do? Okay, well, a transitional housing, sober living house would be a great goal, but that's pretty big. So let's start smaller, and we've just been kind of trying to work our way up in tangible differences that we could make.
Anna, do you want to add anything to that?
As always, JB does such a good job of articulating things far better than I do.
Okay. So sounds like the things that y'all are working on first is housing and jobs and transportation, all of which are a challenge here when you have everything going for you. So when you have things going against you, then obviously that would be even more difficult to acquire and maintain. So we've talked about how you work with people from trauma with this population and the things that you're trying to do to help them build resilience. I'm interested in knowing what you do to stay well, because I imagine if I was in this work, I would feel, I know the immense amount of pressure I feel in the school system, just in social work in general. And this, to me, I would feel like I was in a mad race against time. So what are some of the ways that you maintain perspective, that you're able to stay well to continue the work? Anna, you talked about how closely this resembles your own personal experiences in some ways. So what are some things that y'all do to maintain balance and stay well?
I think that interesting, JB and I have had this conversation, about, our role as volunteers. And, I feel like for me, I could see where, if I really put forth, I could, make this a career, a job, kind of like what Molly did. But I feel like if it became a job or a career, a job, let me say a job for employment, I feel like I would just be so overwhelmed that I'm not doing enough. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not, doing everything. And so, coming back to like a volunteer, I don't say it's less pressure, but I get to do it for more of a passion than, a job kind of thing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, plus you're also, having to do it 40 hours a week. You get to pick how much time you put into it, and the quantity of the time and what you're doing with your time, rather than doing it 40 hours, not only all the things that you love, but all the things that you're being told to do. So that totally makes sense to me. It kind of removes you a step or two, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
That makes
there's
sense.
certainly the pressure of, you know,
And go ahead.
no, I was done.
I was just gonna say, and I mean, there still is. I mean, there might not be external pressure, but for us, you know, whenever you get a phone call and hear about a situation, which, you know, my wife is a pastor of community engagement, so all the phone calls that Boone United Methodist gets related to somebody in a crisis go to her. So, you know, I still hear about a lot of situations, and yeah, we can feel and put a lot of pressure on ourselves to, you know, be moving a million miles an hour and never satisfied. And I think that if we just have to find that balance of being passionate, of course, you know, I don't think any of us in this call are tempted or guilty of being lazy, but, you know, in our minds, we say, you know, okay, well, I'm not being lazy, but I don't want to be overwhelmed either. I don't want to be paralyzed. You know, you don't want to have a panic attack because you're not doing more for the community if you're having a panic attack, you know, if you're breaking down. And so it's one of those situations where, you know, when we're not mentally well, you know, eating can feel selfish, you know. And I'm not just saying that because I ate a sandwich. That's just pure coincidence. But yeah, I mean, when we care about people, when we have hearts full of compassion, it can be really easy to feel any level of self-care can feel selfish. And just trying to create boundaries and trying to balance and having people around you, having practices in place. I mean, like Anna and I were just talking about this last week, you know, feeling pressure and wanting to get more done, and just giving ourselves some grace as volunteers that, like, you know, we're doing the best we can, you know. and things, thankfully, we've got a lot of great partners involved. So it's not just riding on what Anna and I can do as volunteers, but as volunteers, how can we sort of invest our small amount of time in a way that it's multiplied by the efforts of the team. And yeah, I mean, we could spend a whole hour talking about how it's a daily process of staying well and what we do to keep ourselves grounded, and practices and habits and conversations and all that stuff. But that's a full-time job right there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I want to ask Molly that same question, and then JB and Anna, I'm gonna let you end with telling us if there's anything anybody on this call can do to be helpful or how to get involved. So Molly, you always have really good insight about maintaining balance. So anything that you can add to this about how you stay well and how you maintain balance and boundaries?
Well, I think Anna kind of hit the the nail on the head. It can doing work that you're so passionate about all the time and that your personal identity is completely intermingled into, that can be really difficult, and that can wear you out really quickly. And I've definitely been guilty of that. Like, self-care is for other people, you know, like, I've been through some crap. Like, I know how to power through things, you know. I don't do things like that. But it's not helpful. It's not helpful to me. It's not helpful to family. It's not helpful to clients. It's not helpful to the overall mission and purpose of, you know, really what you're trying to do. But it can be really easy to get so caught up in wanting to fix the problem. Like, you have so much suffering and daily crisis and pain and hurt, and you just want to fix it. And we have to be okay with that scattering seeds is enough. And if we don't see those seeds, come to harvest, that's okay. It matters to me that I was just somebody that showed up and was kind, and that's service enough in and of itself. So what do I do to try to stay well? I've learned for myself, like, that self-care is not pedicures and massages and lunches out. Like, that just does not feel good to me. It doesn't add a lot, to my life. That self-care looks like staying in a routine, doing the same things every day, feeding myself, drinking water, trying to not discuss work at home has been one for me. That I've tried to do, which doesn't always, sometimes things boil over into days of whatever, but trying to be intentional about that. My time at home is, it has been a gift of my recovery, to have kids and a partner and a life that I'm incredibly, these are the things that I prayed for, so now that I have them, if they're important, then I need to take care of them and prioritize them. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Molly. I appreciate it. So to wrap us up, let's talk about how, if people want to be involved, what people can do to be supportive, what you need. Anna and JB, mainly for the reentry collaborative. Molly, I don't know if there's anything that y'all need for lead or recovery on the inside or MRJC, but let's start with Molly. Anything that Molly, that people who want to be involved in the work that y'all are doing can do?
Sure. So as I said, we facilitate the Watauga Community Justice Coalition, which is a separate but similar group. So if you're interested or passionate about serving these populations, that's a great group to get involved with. And that, Marissa might have to correct me, is it the first or the second Thursday? The first Thursday. We meet on Zoom at 10:30. That's a great group of folks for lead and recovery on the inside. We have really had an uptick in the need for volunteers, for donations. So during the pandemic, Ashley and I basically worked out of my van or our homes for like a year, or out of our vehicles. And now we have our own office space, so we have capacity to hold more supplies. Donations for clothes right now would be helpful if people have things lying around. I'll put my email address in the chat.
Perfect, thank you. And then Anna and JB, if people want to be involved in what you're doing, what's a good way for them to do that?
Piggybacking off of what Molly was just saying, just to make it plain, if you have any interest, desire, skills, connections with somebody who can help us start a sober living house, contact us, please. That's something that our community really needs and is needed for a super long time. It's been recently established as a really high priority with our WCJC group. If you have any sort of a nudge where we should go, please contact us, reach out, let one of us know. Other than that, you can email highcountryreentry@gmail.com if you are interested in getting connected in any way, shape, or form. If it's just to have an initial conversation to sort of feel out if it would be a good fit, how you could be involved, or if you're interested in popping in periodically on a volunteer call and just kind of see what needs to be done. It's very informal on Thursdays at 10, and we just we get together, we say, okay, what needs to happen this week related to reentry stuff and who's going to do it? It's, think sort of like a college work session, except by Zoom or Google Meet. And then our monthly collaborative meetings, we're kind of sharing updates, what's happening, across the broader collaborative in our area related to reentry, and strategizing, creating goals, creating priorities, figuring out how we can all be working together. And that's monthly. At the last Thursdays, at 11. So every Thursday at 10, last Thursdays at 11. And if you want to reach out, highcountryreentry@gmail.com. We'd love to have your involvement in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, JB. If anybody listening to this call, if you want to put any comments in the chat, I will copy and paste them and email and send them to you so they can see what you had to say when they have time to digest it. Really want to thank y'all for being with us today, for taking time to talk to us about this important work. Appreciate what y'all are doing. I don't know how many families have had people come in and out of the legal system. We've had it in my family. And I read somewhere that something like every time you go into the legal system, your chances increase exponentially that you'll re-enter the legal system again. So just appreciate everything that y'all are doing on behalf of and along with people who are trying to make changes in their life. So hope you have a good rest of the day. It was good to see y'all. Look forward to seeing you. Go ahead.
Can I plug one more thing I forgot? Okay, so we have started our first group in our new space, and it is called I Love You, But Not Your Addiction. And it is a support group for family and friends of people with a loved one who is impacted by addiction or substance use disorder. It is free. Your loved one does not have to be a lead client. It's open to the community. Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. and that is facilitated by our lead case manager, Dale Hudler.
Okay, you want to type that in the thing as well, Molly?
Yep.
All right, so and we'll let everybody else go so you can go to the bathroom, get a drink before your next meeting starts at 1. We'll see you back here next Wednesday. We're back in the groove after the holidays. It's good to see you and be with you. I hope the rest of your week goes well, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.